when I look back on it now, I thought it was such a negative conversation. And I remember being so upset and so distraught and feeling so alone because my husband was gone and I had no family around. And I just remember feeling the worst I'd felt in a long, long time. And surrogacy sounded so taboo to me. And it felt like he was telling me, you're a failure. You can't carry a child. Most women should be able to do it. Not, he didn't say any of these things, but that's what I was hearing. When I think back, I remember like saying to my husband, like, this doctor, I literally can remember like where I was, the time of day. I can picture his face. There's so much about it that like that conversation just upsets me in so many ways. And I know it wasn't meant to be that way. At the end of the day, I have my son because of that conversation. And so I have to thank him for navigating me down that path and kind of mentioning an option that I never thought was possible.
You're listening to Breaking the Ice, a podcast and community created for wives and girlfriends of professional hockey players, but since has turned into so much more. Stories shared by women around the globe who come together for a sense of connection and community. You may be in the sports industry, a hockey parent, an athlete, or a person who just enjoys podcasts, but I can promise you'll be inspired by these women every single day, while we evolve through the tips, tricks, do's, and don'ts for all things hockey. And guess what? So much more. For women, by women, but especially for a hockey community. So lace them up and tune in for a new episode every Wednesday. Thanks for listening. Hello. Welcome back to the podcast. This is a longer episode today, but it is honestly worth every minute. I'm super excited for you guys to listen. I wanted to just kind of hop on here briefly for the intro and just mention that I am running a Black Friday sale on the retreat. So this is going to go through Sunday. So if you have been thinking about joining in on that, now is the time to bite the bullet. Grab your friends, talk to them, and it's only $300 to reserve your spot right now. So let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to chat on the phone too if you want more information, or just talk via Instagram. We have such an amazing group and I would love for you to join us. And also I wanted to mention that starting December 1st, I have a 12 days of giveaway that I am hosting on the Instagram page. So there are so many amazing businesses within our sports world that are collaborating with me on this giveaway, and I cannot wait to share with you guys. There are going to be some amazing prizes, and you can potentially use these prizes, which are all going to be gift cards, to get some of your Christmas shopping done. So I just wanted to mention that super briefly, but today on the podcast, I have Terra O'Reilly joining me, and Terra is honestly such an inspiration. She is such a strong woman, and she comes on the podcast today and shares about her fertility journey that her and her husband have gone through together over the past 4 to 5 years. Terra shares her experience about her miscarriages, and she also shares about her journey with IVF. We also share a not so common bond, which is surrogacy. So for her firstborn child, Terra actually went through a surrogate, which she kind of shares her story on the podcast, and I don't want to ruin anything, so you'll have to listen to find out. But I actually also have a connection to surrogacy, and you'll also have to listen to the podcast to find that out. It's kind of a long story, hence why we were chatting for so long. We just both had so much to add and to talk about with each other. So it's a very natural, authentic conversation that we had, and I hope you enjoy. She is honestly such a beautiful light, and I'm super grateful that she chose my podcast to share her story on. So Terra wanted to come on and really just open up about this to help other women in general and in our lifestyle that might be going through fertility struggles, to know that you're not alone, and you can always reach out to her on Instagram, and she would be such a supportive friend if you are going through a hard time and need a listening ear.
I literally am running off of 3 hours of sleep because my son's discovered how to climb out of his crib.
No.
Yes.
Oh
It's been like going on for a month, but he was doing it and then getting back in the crib and going to sleep. So we weren't like making a big deal of it. And then now he's doing it and sleeping on the floor. I had to sleep in his room last night, and all night he was like, ear, pointing to my ears, nose, eyes, and saying colors and shapes. And yeah, it was a disaster. So
how old is he?
He is 20 months.
Okay. I'm like, at what point do I need to prepare for this crib crawling thing?
Okay. So I was Googling it because I was like, he's a big boy for his age, but I'm like, this kind of seems young. And everything I found said that it's pretty young. Like most kids start doing it like in between 2 and 3.
Okay.
So I hope you don't have to deal with it this early, because I think he's too young to like transition to a toddler bed. And I don't want to do it when I'm due in 2 months, because that would just be a disaster.
Oh my God. No. And like, just the fact that they can like get out and like leave their room at any point. It's how do they even listen at that age to not do that? Like, I feel like they would be wandering the house.
Literally, that's what it said online. Like, you can't reason with them at that age. So like, it's not like I can teach him like, oh, you need to stay in bed. If you get up in the morning, like I'll give you a treat or something. I can't even bribe him. He just,
could you try to move him into a pack and play? Like, I wonder if that would.
So he knows how to climb out of the pack and play already.
Seriously?
Yes. He puts it's crazy watching him. He literally just hikes his leg up on the corner and rolls himself out.
Did like the first time he did that, did like that scare the shit out of you?
Well, yeah, like, and the first time he did it, he never fell and didn't make a noise. So it wasn't until I looked in the monitor and I was like, oh my, in his bed. And then I turned scrolled the room with the camera, and he was sitting in the corner, like playing with the door stopper behind the door that makes like that sound. Yes. And I was like, oh my God, how long has he been doing this? And then I went in and just picked him up, put him back in, and he was fine. But I think it's been going on longer than we probably realize.
That would be really scary to look at the monitor and they're not in the bed.
Oh, totally. And especially like, I always get so paranoid when my husband's gone, like in the house we're in, my son's like, it's like a split level. So he's down below and we're up top. And so I'm always like checking constantly. Yeah. Like that would have scared the shit out of me if I actually thought someone came in and took him.
Or if it was like the middle of the night or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like, thank God I was still up and found it out, or like you found him.
Yeah.
So,
oh my God, the things I have to look forward to.
Oh yes. And so soon, I'm sure. Cause I think I saw your son's turning 1 in a couple of days, right?
Yeah, on Thursday. And it's crazy because he's pretty like physically advanced. Like he's not talking or anything yet. And like, he's actually not walking, but he's been crawling since 5 months. And I'm like, okay, dude, let's go. I'm sick of the crawling business, because he's just like, it's annoying because I keep having to like pick him up and like moving him, and I'd rather him just walk.
Do it himself.
Yeah, exactly. And so
my daughter Kala didn't walk till like literally just after she turned 1. I bet that'll happen with your son too, because she was an early crawler, and then she would even pull herself up and like maneuver around, but she was like more timid to let go and walk.
Yeah, he's like taking steps. It's weird. Like he'll take like 5 steps, and then he like gets scared and fall and like sits down. And I'm like, you can walk. Like I literally know you can. He's just scared.
He probably too. It's like it's comfortable to crawl, right? So he's just like, oh, it's so much. Just get down and crawl.
Yeah, exactly.
And try to do it this way. That's exactly what Kala was like. And Cam my son didn't even crawl. He like army crawled and then just went straight to walking.
How old was he when he walked?
He was 10 and a bit months when he walked.
Okay. It's so interesting, like how different all babies are.
I know. And I remember like calling our pediatrician in the States being like, I think something's wrong. Like he's not crawling. And she's like, well, Terra, he's in the 99th percentile for everything. Like he's a big boy. He's almost 30 pounds. Like, I doubt he'll crawl. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I didn't really think that was a thing. She's like, I'm sure he'll be walking soon. And literally within like a couple weeks, he was walking. I'm like, oh, okay.
Oh yeah. I'm kind of excited. I know like a lot of moms say, oh no, just you wait. I'm like, no, you guys, like, I understand if he started crawling at like 8 months, like, which is, I feel like average,
Yeah.
for 7 months or whatever. But I'm like, he's been crawling
So
since
early.
5 months. Like, I'm done. He's pulling up and standing and everything. And I'm like, just go.
He will probably take off when he like finally feels comfortable.
Oh,
Calla
yeah.
was like that. Like she was so timid and she'd take a couple steps and then she'd just be like, oh, it's easier to crawl. But when she finally decided she wanted to go, like she never, people saw her like 3 days later and was like, she's walking now?
Yeah.
Like everywhere. I'm like, yeah, it just started a couple days ago. Like finally she just took off. So I'm sure it'll be like that. And it is fun when they finally start to walk, because then it makes it easier for you and it's easier to go out. Like you don't always need to bring the stroller because they're so adventurous and they just want to do it on their own.
But yeah, he does not stop moving. I don't know if your son is like that, but it is like,
Yes.
so
It's
I'm
a
like,
boy thing, I think.
that's what I heard. I thought, I'm like, oh, this is just how like all babies are. But my friends that have girls are like, no, like
It's definitely a boy thing. Like my family will FaceTime us and my daughter like loves to be on FaceTime and like dance and get all the attention. And Camden won't even sit still. He has like no interest in looking at my parents on the phone. He's like, I'm doing this. I'm over here doing this. Like my dad's like, he really isn't interested in us. I'm like, no, he just doesn't stop ever.
Oh man, you're gonna be in for one once do you know what you're having?
No, we decided not to find out.
Okay, well, I think that's like, I think that's okay because, okay, I do not know how people do that for their first or their second because.
Okay, I was just going to ask you, but I'm assuming you found out.
Oh yeah, I paid like $200.
We found out with both them. Yeah, I was like, I couldn't not, especially when I found out I was pregnant with Calla. And then when I got to like 12 weeks and knew everything was going pretty good, I was like, I have to know. I'm having kids 4 months apart. There's no way I can't be prepared.
Yeah. And how fun is that to have one of each? Did you like freak out when you found out you were having a girl?
Oh yeah, I thought it was a boy. I'm with like, so obviously with IVF and everything, you can find out what your embryos are if you want after the genetic testing. And because they thought that our issue was basically egg or sperm related, we found out like we had majority male and there was only a couple females. So I was certain, even though Calla was natural, that she was male, because I was like, oh, we can only make boys.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
And then when I found out it was a girl, I think I had convinced myself so much that it was a boy. I was super shocked. I'm like, oh my gosh, not at all prepared. But I think it worked out the best having a boy and a girl that way. I think if it was two boys, I don't know, maybe they would be compared to a little bit more, or like, this is terrible, but I lie to a lot of people and just say they're twins, so I don't have to tell our story.
Yeah.
And it's easier to get away with when I have a girl and a boy than if they were both boys, and Cam's huge. So
yeah, I told you, you're like, yep, they're twins. We're not getting into this.
I told this older couple one time and the lady was like, oh, well, I sure know who got all the nutrients in the womb. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Just because he's huge, he looks like he ate all the food and she didn't get any, I guess.
You know what? I have to say that I feel like all hockey boy babies are massive. Like all of my friends' boys in this hockey life are huge.
It's so true. I feel like that. I've noticed that too. Any girls that I know that have boys, they're all like, and even if they're not tall, they're like solid boys.
Yeah.
Or like they're tall. And I've never seen like a little like lanky, tiny hockey player's son.
I know. It's hilarious. I mean, Crosby was only like 8 pounds, 1 ounce, I think, but he chunked up quick. Like I remember his 8-week appointment. I think he was like already 16 pounds or something. Like
that's
something
big though. Well, like 8, did you go early or?
I was a week early. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Like, I mean, that's still pretty big. Camden, he had to be induced almost like a little bit less than a month early because our surrogate got preeclampsia, and he was 7'9" at 36 weeks.
Oh
yeah.
God,
imagine.
stop.
Yes. My poor surrogate, like she had 2 little girls of her own before, and they were both like 6'14" and like 6'10". And then this 7-pound, like 9-ounce boy, thank God it was C-section. She didn't have to birth him naturally full term. He probably would have been like 11 pounds.
And how big was Calla?
She was tiny. So with my like issues that I have, my clotting disorder, one of the main things is like growth restriction sometimes because of the blood thinners I take. So I had to be induced at 39 weeks and she was 6'8".
Okay.
Yeah. So if I would have been like, I was 7'9" and I was a week late. So essentially she's built like me, I would say. If I would have went full term, she probably would have been around 7'9", which is pretty average for a girl.
Yeah.
But she was only 6'8" at 39 weeks. So
Oh my gosh. Okay.
and
Well,
he
I feel
was
like
36 weeks and huge.
that's insane. Like, could you imagine if she had to go 4 more weeks? Like how
I know. And like the plan was, because she had vaginal births with her daughters, that was what she want. Like, obviously it's kind of our choice, but I wasn't going to elect to make her have a C-section just for preference. Like, I just don't think that's fair. But yeah, so she was going to have a vaginal birth, and if he would have went full term, the poor girl, I'm sure would have been like, I'm never being a surrogate ever again.
Yeah, I think she would have chosen an elective C-section if that were the case.
I'm sure of it.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I feel like we already just like dove in. So
I know.
I feel like we should just keep it going from here. I mean, thank you for coming on. I feel like this recording has been a long time coming between kids' schedules and being on the opposite sides of the world, but I'm glad we're finally making it work.
Yes, me too. I know I feel like we've been postponing this for so long, and I've told a bunch of people that I was coming on to kind of talk about our journey and everything. And they keep asking me, have you recorded it yet? And I'm like, no, but it's almost been like a year now. So soon.
I know. I was like, I know we're going to do it at some point, so it's okay. And then of course, then we finally get around to doing it. And then we had like a disconnect with our audio, but that's okay. We wound up just like talking for a while, and now we're just catching up.
Yes. Now we're here finally.
We'll start off because I mean, there's a lot to unpack within your story. But will you just kind of start off telling everyone a little bit about yourself?
I used to be a figure skater. I skated professionally, and people always ask me if that's how I met my husband, but it's not really. My best friend is his cousin. And so she introduced us, and we kind of had a little bit of like a whirlwind relationship. We were engaged pretty quickly, and got married about a year and a half after that. And I always knew that I wanted kids for sure, but even a big family. So not long after we got married, I ended up having a miscarriage. And miscarriages are so common. They happen in 1 in 4 pregnancies. And even though I didn't really know much about them, I was assured by my doctor that it's pretty common that would happen, and just keep trying and it'll all work out. I did know that I had endometriosis, so I knew that would kind of be an issue. It was something that I dealt with most of my life. So I ended up seeing a specialist to kind of look into if I would need surgery for that. And they ended up diagnosing me with stage 4 endometriosis, which is pretty much the worst that it can get. It was like all over my ovaries. And basically I was told like there would be no way you'd be able to carry a pregnancy with this much like abnormal growth within your uterus. So I ended up getting surgery for that. I had what's called like a laparoscopy and a hysteroscopy. And the surgery was almost 5 hours long, which is extremely long, especially when they told my husband when I went in, it would be about 3 hours. And while they were in there, they discovered like I had like a decent amount of like kind of fetal tissue left over. And like they could tell that I had probably had more miscarriages than what I knew about. So most likely chemical pregnancies, things that like your period just might be a couple days late or a week late. And then, but there was actually something growing. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was kind of a lot of information to take in right away, because I don't think any of us kind of like divulge or research any of that. I mean, maybe some people do before they start trying to get pregnant, but I kind of just was like, oh yeah, you have sex and you have a baby. Like it is what it is. Clearly it wasn't that easy for us. So after my surgery, they said, oh, okay, once you've healed, your chances of getting pregnant are pretty high. So not long after that, I got pregnant again. And most of my miscarriages happened between like 8 and 12 weeks. So far enough along that like, you would see a heartbeat, or you should see like normal growth in the baby and a sac and fetal pole and all that. And I mean, obviously when you're first trying and you're not seeing specialists, you're not getting that much attention. So a lot of times I might have miscarried at like 9 or 10 weeks, but I wouldn't find out until my 12-week appointment when I was going in for an ultrasound.
Like you said, you might have miscarried early, like at 8 weeks, but then you don't find out till 12 weeks. But then that whole time you're thinking that you're pregnant.
Exactly.
Which is so hard because then you go in for that 12-week appointment, and that's kind of like when you're, quote, in the clear, like people feel more comfortable like sharing that with other people. And so I can only imagine like how hard that would be to go in and get that news.
Yeah, it's kind of just like you said, like when you go in for your 12-week appointment, it's almost like you're so excited because you're finally at the stage where you can start telling people. And you're, if you want, you can do elect to have blood work done and maybe find out what the sex is. And you don't know, like a lot of women will start to bleed and then pass before then. And that had happened to me with some of the miscarriages. One in particular was like literally the day before my 12-week appointment. We had done IVF. So I had transferred 2 embryos and knew that I was pregnant with twins. And I was having some cramping and then started to bleed a lot and ended up going to emerge and kind of just passed everything before I even was able to get to the 12-week appointment to find out, how far along the babies were when I lost them or when they stopped growing or anything like that. So yeah, there's a big window, like 3 months, where you really don't know what's going on with your body. And when you do start seeing fertility specialists, you're monitored so much more closely that you're getting kind of ultrasounds. Like my first one, they would do blood work to make sure your HCG levels are rising appropriately up until 5 weeks. And then 6 weeks, you'd have your first ultrasound to see if you had a heartbeat. So you're monitored so much more closely. But before that, it's kind of just a waiting game until 12 weeks. And especially in my case, and with the diagnosis we came to at the end of it, it was a lot of just waiting and kind of tormenting yourself and being scared and anxiety. And I kept so much of it very private. I didn't tell a lot of people. Even my family didn't even know that I had miscarried until after my endometriosis surgery. And that's how private we kept it. So I look back on it all now, and I almost wish I would have been more open and told my friends what was going on instead of keeping it to myself, because I feel like I would have had so much more support. But miscarriages and infertility they're becoming more talked about, but for the longest time they were so, taboo and it was such a subject that people kept so private that I kind of felt like I couldn't open up about it.
Yeah. And I feel like it's probably something that would be really hard to process. And, if someone hasn't necessarily gone through that, they might not always know like what to say, which exactly. What can you say when you're like, there's nothing anyone can say that can make you feel better. And it's just, I'm really glad it's becoming more talked about, because I hate that people go through that. But as it's becoming more talked about, there's so many people that I now hear that had a miscarriage that I never would have even known, even putting stuff up on like the podcast page, people saying that they struggle with fertility or have had miscarriages and stuff. It's a lot of people, and it's really common.
It's so common, and it's sad that people feel the need, or that we all feel the need to keep things so private. Like I know since I've come forward, so many women have reached out to me and asked for like advice or shared their stories. And, I have even friends recently that have gone through miscarriages that have felt comfortable enough to reach out to me because they know what I went through. And I'm so thankful that they have me, because I know, not that I wouldn't have had that if I would have opened up, but I didn't have that when I was going through everything. And it puts a lot of strain on so many things in your life. But I would say the biggest strain was my relationship with my husband. Everyone deals with like emotions and grief so differently. And he's a talker. He likes to talk about things and kind of speak about your emotions and lay it all out on the table. And I'm the opposite. And so, when you're just married and you're dealing with this, you have no idea how you're supposed to get through it or how the other person's going to react. And so it was definitely a struggle for us trying to navigate our ways through 4 years of lots of ups and downs, and not a lot of support, or I guess avenues to reach out to, or people to talk to while we were going through it.
Yeah. And in what ways did it impact your relationship?
I would say now we're probably stronger than ever. I think it made us stronger, because of everything we went through. But during the time, there was moments where I wasn't sure like we would make it out together, because personally, one of the biggest things I struggled with was, as a woman, we're not put on this earth to reproduce, but it's an option that we have if that's something we choose. And growing up, you don't think that it's not going to be an option for you if that's what you want. So for me, when I couldn't kind of give him the family that we wanted, I felt like I was holding him back from, so much. And so I took so much on myself, like it was my fault. And part of me was like, you know what, maybe we're not meant to be together and he should move on and find someone else. And that person can give him the family that he wants. And then I won't have to feel like this sense of failure. And that was the biggest thing I struggled with for 4 years, maybe a little more. For him, it was like the opposite. Like I remember telling him this, and he was like, I don't care if we ever have a family. I don't care if we have our own, if we want to adopt, like, I just want to be with you. It doesn't matter. But that, for me, I couldn't even think that way. It was just, I felt like I was letting him down.
Oh, I'm getting emotional over here. It's really sad that, like you feel that way, and other women, I'm sure other women listening that have gone through that feel that way too, because I think people that go through this, like, I feel like you never, like you said, grow up thinking that you're going to struggle with getting pregnant or struggle with carrying a baby till term. Like that's just not even a thought, because
no,
it just breaks my heart that like that you feel that way. And it's really, really powerful, and as a statement on your relationship that your husband was able to say, like, it's okay, and there's other ways to do this. And but thank you for sharing that, because I think like a lot of people that do go through these miscarriages, I don't know, maybe they open up about the miscarriage, but they might not open up about that aspect of their relationship.
Yeah, I think I'm getting emotional talking about it too. I feel like it's been a long time since I've really like dove into all my feelings of everything. And I'm glad I'm able to talk about it now, because I do know that there are other people that have felt similar, that you're so many relationships in your life, and maybe not even just my husband, but friendships as well, because I changed as a person with everything I went through.
Absolutely.
And you're so used to being like, a lot of our best friends we tell everything to, and I was hiding this big part of my life from a lot of them, and those relationships struggled too. And it's kind of now that I like to say on the other side of it, and I'm so fortunate and so lucky to be here, because I know not every woman has a story like we do. But I am kind of just now trying to like navigate through rebuilding, or figuring out, where we go from here, because for so long we were stuck in this place of, struggle, and just kind of figuring out how to navigate it.
Yeah.
And I know other women go through, maybe they haven't felt the exact same way as me, but I do know I have lots of friends, unfortunately, that have had miscarriages or struggled, and their relationships feel it too, because like I said, not everyone deals with grief and struggle the same way. So and it's not, like you said, no one knows how to really react when you tell them you're struggling with infertility or you're struggling with a miscarriage. It's not like you lost a grandfather and someone, you kind of just all say the same things. I'm sorry for your loss. And no one knows exactly how you're feeling. And so no one really knows how to react to it.
What would you say is like yeah, oh yeah, for sure. And I think like I don't know, do you ever feel, or did you ever feel like when you were going through this that you didn't want to like burden people with this? Because I know I've talked to other
100%.
friends. Yeah.
Yes. And even now, it's sad, but I don't like, I don't tell I mean, obviously in the hockey world, every year you're meeting these friends and you don't have anyone else around. So I definitely have been very vocal about our situation and met a lot of girls that I've been able to confide in and share my story with. But sometimes I will meet people and they'll ask me the age difference between my kids or whatever. And I just feel like I don't want to burden them with getting into my story. So I'm just going to tell them they're twins. Because it's easier than telling them what I went through. And not to mention, a lot of people don't agree with surrogacy and have different views on it. Or I've had some people assume my son Camden is adopted. And that hurts me to my core because I know what I went through to have him. And it was far more severe than what I went through to have my daughter. So yeah, there's just definitely that. I feel like even now I'm opening up about it because I want to help people, because I want people to feel that they're not alone, that they can reach out if they want to talk, or even if they don't want to talk, it just gives them a sense of comfort knowing that someone else has gone through it and it's worked out for them. But the thought of like someone listening to your story being like, oh my gosh, you know, I don't know what to say. And now I feel awkward because they just opened up and shared their life story. That like side of burdening people, I feel all the time.
I totally can see that. What would you say? And I want to get into the whole surrogacy journey, and obviously we're going to have a long convo about that.
Absolutely.
But what would you say would be like the most supportive thing that a friend could do for you if you're going through something like this?
I would say the biggest thing is probably, you know, just allowing the lines of communication to be there if they want to talk, and just being supportive. Like sometimes just asking how someone's doing, and it doesn't need to necessarily be fully pregnancy related, but like, how are you doing? You know, how are things going? Have you been able to like get out and enjoy yourself, or like do something to make you feel better? Just kind of asking how someone is doing makes a world of a difference, because I think sometimes people give support initially when they hear that you've lost a baby or what you're going through, and then it just kind of trickles off. And the grief takes a while to get over. And so, you know, even if it's a month later and someone just reaches out and says, I've been thinking of you, like, how are you doing? That can mean so much. I've tried, because I've had a couple of friends go through some miscarriages recently, and since I've been through my own journey, I sent one of my friends flowers. I sent another friend like a little care package. I just think sometimes if you can just give them something that'll put a smile on their face and just kind of take their mind off of all the bad that's been going on, that can make a huge change as well.
I love that.
And I mean, you know, I think the hockey world, or being in this hockey world can make things even harder, because you don't have like your initial support system down the street to come over and, you know, have a cup of tea with you or just chat. You can feel even more alone, because sometimes when, you know, it might happen at the beginning of the season when you don't know anyone on the team and you really feel like you have no one to talk to. So yeah, just depending on wherever you are, you don't even need to be near the person, just kind of offering that little, you know, helping hand, or like sense of support can make a big difference.
Yeah. And I feel like, you know, some people are definitely going to be more private about that, and that's totally okay. But sure. I do think there's a large amount of women that have gone through this that want to talk about this, but it's like they don't necessarily want to bring it up on their own. So I love that, just checking in and continuing to check in, because sure, a month might have gone on, but like you never really get over that, you know? And it's like, it's probably, there's constant reminders of going through miscarriages and fertility struggles. And so I think just like continuing to check in is super important. And it's a good reminder to me to do that with my friends as well. So
For sure. And you know, you mentioned like you never really get over it. Just recently, so every October is like child and infant loss awareness month. And um my surrogate she always reaches out to me on little things like that, but she had reached out to me saying she was thinking of me. And um I always find myself, you know, at some points thinking back about our story, and you don't really ever get over it. Like, it definitely, everything I went through changed me as a person. It changed my relationships. It changed so much. Um, and I think that sometimes people might think, oh, well, now she has two beautiful children and she's expecting again. And, you know, she's over it, I guess, in a sense. But no, that you don't get over it. I mean, essentially, one day I'm going to have to tell my son he was carried by a surrogate. And that's something I think of daily because, like I said, people sometimes just don't know what surrogacy is, or they're just not informed. Sometimes people like to make their own assumptions. So they might think he's adopted or think he's not mine. All those things run through my mind constantly. And yeah, it's just something I'll probably deal with for the rest of my life, but I'm learning new ways to kind of navigate through it as time goes on. And I hope that my story and opening up about it and the things that I would like to do to create awareness and to hopefully help others, I hope that can make a difference one day, because I think that down the road we should be able to all, if we want, open up and feel a huge sense of support versus feel like we can't open up because you know, it's just something we shouldn't talk about.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that you did IVF. So at what
Yes.
point, like, and you had several miscarriages, at what point did you guys decide, okay, we're going to try this?
So I had had two miscarriages before we decided to do IVF. The reasoning kind of behind it was a lot to do with my endometriosis. We basically, after the two miscarriages, and I had also had a chemical pregnancy in there as well, which is basically I was pregnant and then probably before 6 weeks ended up losing the pregnancy. So it's usually a chemical is there's no heartbeat yet. Kind of just it's the baby's implanted and it's starting to grow and then stops growing. So essentially 3 losses, which is what they usually say, at least in the United States. That's when they'll send you to a fertility specialist to help you. We were really, really fortunate because my husband was playing in the NHL at the time. So we had NHL coverage, which their health coverage is night and day compared to AHL. And so we actually, it includes 5 free rounds of IVF.
Wow.
Which is
That's amazing.
incredible because the amount of money that you spend on IVF and medication and everything is insane. And so,
yeah, I've heard it's like, I mean, even surrogacy too is so expensive.
Yeah, well, surrogacy is close to 6 figures.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what it cost us, but we didn't even have to pay for IVF, and IVF can be anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000.
Wow.
And I mean, obviously it depends on which state you're in, because and in Canada, it's a little bit different. You can qualify for 1 free round because of our healthcare system. So it's different everywhere, but it's definitely very, very pricey. So our reasoning to just go straight to IVF was because after the losses and some of the testing I had done, they were kind of suggesting that the issue would probably be the embryos. So that basically my eggs weren't good enough quality. And so that's why the babies were not surviving. So when we decided to go through with it, basically you stimulate to do an Ivf Egg Retrieval, which can be different for everyone. And it usually is you're taking estrogen and progesterone and lots of different medication to help your eggs grow to a mass amount for them to do a surgery and remove them all. And I was fortunate enough to get about 41 eggs on my first retrieval, which is a lot. But it was because we had kind of waited too long, or the doctor waited too long to do it. They were kind of, a lot of them were like what they call like overstimulated and not great quality because they had grown for too long. So I ended up only getting about 5 embryos out of all those. And then we genetically tested them all. And I was fortunate enough that they all came back normal. So where they were telling us it was probably the issue was the embryos, when we did IVF, there was not one issue with the embryos. So we kind of were in another position of.
Did they wind up testing your husband then?
So they tested him before we did everything. Basically, the only kind of testing they can do for men is just test their sperm. And they do say sometimes in athletes, especially during the hockey season, because your testicles can heat up when you're constantly sweating. So that can reduce your sperm count. So they do say that. So he was tested like during the season, and then in the summer, there is a little bit of a difference, but not much, but there was no issue. So once that happened, we just went forward with the transfer we transferred 2 embryos, and they both took, and then I lost them, and there was kind of just no reason why, because everything looked great on paper and my levels all looked good and the embryos were good quality. And in this time we lived in Nashville in the summer, so we were moving back home. So I ended up having to go to a different clinic. And that clinic kind of was the same thing. Like the hardest part, I think, through my whole journey was I heard a lot of, we have no idea what's wrong. And my husband and I would say sometimes, like, it would just be so nice for them to call with a result and be like, so this came back positive or negative or whatever it is, and that's what's wrong. Like we would never get that. It was always like, oh, so everything came back great. And we're like, okay, but that doesn't help us. Like,
yeah, it's like, we want to know.
So that
the unknown is probably like so frustrating.
Yeah. And I mean, you can only advocate for yourself so much. Like, I'm not a doctor. I don't know the ins and outs of fertility or anything, but of course I was on like my best friend Google trying to figure everything out. Like, what should they test me for? What could be the problem? And everything that they would do, we couldn't get any answers to. So I ended up doing another egg retrieval in Nashville, because they felt like the stimulation process they had me on in Minnesota wasn't what they would use for kind of all the results they were getting on things. They said I stimulated for too long. I shouldn't have been on such high medication. So I redid it, and I ended up getting 28 eggs the second time around, which initially I was kind of disappointed in, because I had 41 and then 28. I was assuming I would get more. But I ended up getting 10 embryos out of that, which was really good. And all of them came back normal again, which according to my doctor is not very common. So that's really good that they were all normal. A lot of times most women will have like 1 or 2 that are abnormal. So all in all, with both of our retrievals, we had 15 embryos, all genetically tested and all great quality.
Wow.
So, which is amazing, and I'm so thankful for. But with that being said, it still wasn't giving us any answers as to why I was having all these miscarriages.
So did you ever get those answers?
So I did. In total, I ended up, so I did 3 IVF transfers, one time with 2 embryos and 2 times just with 1. So I miscarried 4 babies via IVF. And then I had 3 natural miscarriages, 1 that was twins naturally. And so it was after my 5th miscarriage that the doctor, at this point we were in Des Moines, Iowa, and the doctor had called me in. This was definitely probably the lowest point in my whole journey. And I was about 10 and a half weeks along and found out that I was miscarrying again from an ultrasound, and my husband was on the road. and I was alone, and they called me in to speak with the doctor to kind of go over things. And I was very adamant, like, I need to figure out what's wrong. I want answers. I want every test that we haven't done. I want to figure out what's going on. Like, I'm not getting any answers. And I just kind of felt like I wanted them to throw the book at me. And instead they were just kind of going over regular protocol. And obviously that wasn't working. And I had been speaking with a nurse that I had in Nashville at the time, that in the summer before, she really advocated for me, and was asking kind of other professionals she had worked with in Colorado for information and tests that they could test me on and all this. So I had been in contact with her. But this doctor told me in the meeting that he felt like I would never be able to carry a pregnancy, and that I should probably look into surrogacy. And when I look back on it now, I thought it was such a negative conversation. And I remember being so upset and so distraught and feeling so alone because my husband was gone and I had no family around. And not to mention, I knew I was miscarrying, but I hadn't started passing anything yet. So, or I didn't know if I was going to need a DNC or what the process was going to be. I just remember feeling the worst I'd felt in a long time. And surrogacy sounded so taboo to me, and just, it felt like he was telling me, you're a failure. You can't carry a child. Most women should be able to do it. Not, he didn't say any of these things, but that's what I was hearing. Mm-hmm. And I remember being like, no, we're not doing surrogacy. I'm going to carry a child. If he won't help me, I will go see another doctor. They will run more tests. And I remember calling the nurse or emailing her, and then she called me to kind of tell her what we went over and how I felt. And I didn't know any of her situation at the time, that she had also had a surrogate carry children for her and her husband. But she very much was like, we can do more, we can test you more. Surrogacy is completely your decision. But so she said, I would think about it. I would really talk to your husband about that. There's great organizations and agencies that can help you. But if that's not something you're interested in, then that's okay. Like, I will find other things we can do to help you. But it wasn't until after we had moved down the path of surrogacy and I had another miscarriage that they ended up kind of figuring out what was wrong. And it was all because of my nurse, Candace, in Nashville, that advocated for me and had my back and researched and basically made me a case study to find out what was wrong. And I literally owe my family and everything to her, because if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I feel like there are so many good people in this world that can have your back and can want what's best for you without needing anything in return. And she's one person that I feel like came into my life when I really needed her. And I'm so thankful for her for finding out, what was going on.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm getting emotional too. I know that was not easy for you to share that. And I'm so sorry that you went through this. I can hear the pain in your voice. And even though time has passed, it's just like going back over this. I know it's not easy to talk about. So thank you. And I think a lot of the feelings that you're speaking of and saying that you felt at the time, and when you heard that from your doctor, other people are going to connect with that, and they're going to be so happy that you shared that.
Oh, thank you. It's when I think back, I remember like saying to my husband, this doctor, I literally can remember like where I was, the time of day. I can picture his face. There's so much about it that like that conversation just upsets me in so many ways. And I know it wasn't meant to be that way. And he didn't mean it in any malicious form. He was doing his job and telling me what he thought was best. And, at the end of the day, I have my son because of that conversation. And so I have to thank him for navigating me down that path and kind of mentioning an option that I never thought was possible. But at the time, it's really hard to look at it that way. I think
Absolutely.
I was just in a place where anything upset me, and it was hard to get out of there. It took a long time. That was definitely the lowest of our journey for sure. And there was a lot of people that stood up and helped us during that time. The organization where my husband was playing, the Iowa Wild, they helped us through so many things. More on like from an emotional side of things, and the support that we needed that way. And then friends too. I had so many friends step up. One in particular in Nashville, my friend Kirsten, she knew a lot about surrogacy. And she actually brought it up to me before I had even told her the doctor had mentioned it. So it was kind of interesting. But her kind of positive spin on it and how supportive she was of surrogacy really helped me kind of like get a better grasp on it and start to explore that option, because I don't think if it would have been for other people in my life, explaining it more to me, I don't know if I would have went down that road. I think just because it's becoming so much more and more common, and you're hearing about like celebrities and lots of people having to go down the path of surrogacy to have a biological child. But I think back then, not that it was that long ago, I didn't have enough knowledge or information on it to really know much about it. And in my mind, the idea of surrogacy just to me was because I was a failure and couldn't do it myself.
Yeah,
Definitely.
you definitely need a support system regardless, yes, but especially going through really hard times. And actually, when our audio wasn't working, I threw up that little question box. Someone who is also kind of going through having a couple miscarriages right now, she asked, what got you through? Like, having one is hard enough, she said. Like, going through multiple, just how? Like, what are some things that really just got you through day to day?
Honestly, my first response to that is I don't know. When I look back, I think I was really lucky enough in the beginning. I had a good job in figure skating, and I was traveling a lot, so that was something that could really take my mind off of things. But I think that also worked in the opposite way too, because it was an escape. But then when I would be back wherever we were living at the time and working from home or whatever it was I was doing, I was right back in it and feeling all those emotions I kind of shoved away for so long. I think at the end of the day, what really got me through was that I knew no matter what, I would have the family I wanted one day, regardless of how I got there. And I've always been very open. I would love to adopt. And that was something that was always on my mind. But I think I was lucky enough too, having done IVF and knowing I had these embryos, that like I would get my own child, even if I couldn't carry them. And so that is what kind of kept me going, or helped me get through it all, was that I knew I would get there one day. The journey was long and it was taking a lot longer than I would have liked, but I knew one day we would have what we wanted. And I kind of always just kept that in my mind. And I also think too, when I look back, my husband was really great at helping me, kind of he always wanted me to really speak my feelings when I was going through things, but he also wanted me to live in the moment. So if things weren't going right and we were going through a miscarriage, or we had gotten bad news at the clinic or whatever it was, he was like, okay, we can't change what's going on. We can't change the situation, but we can go for a nice dinner tonight, or we can go on a trip to Chicago, or we can do something that can, that we might not be able to do one day when we have kids. And I think when I look back over the 4 years, we really tried to kind of embrace what we could control and try not to dwell on what we couldn't.
I love
And
that.
that I think is probably what got us through it. And no, don't get me wrong. Of course, when you're like embracing what you can control and you're trying to go out and have fun, I wasn't always having fun, wasn't
Mm-hmm.
always happy trying to do things to make myself happy. But sometimes when you like force yourself to put a smile on your face and just do something that you know is going to make you feel good, it does make you feel good in a way. It
It's
doesn't
so
take away all the hurt, but it does help.
it's so hard to get out of the house when you're in a bad headspace.
Totally.
It's like you really like, I mean, and when people are trying to, let's go do something, like the last thing you want to do is like get dressed and go somewhere. But
Exactly.
you're so right. Like it does elevate your mood just to like get out and get a change of scenery instead of just like laying in bed. And some days that's okay. I mean, every day it's okay, but
Yeah.
just to like get out for a walk or something, like
I was lucky enough to the year that we had gone through kind of our fifth miscarriage and we're told about surrogacy. I met probably a girl that will be one of my best friends for forever on the team that we were playing on in Iowa. And she was kind of going through not a, I would say in a way similar. They were trying for another and it was taking a lot longer and it was getting difficult. They were doing some stuff to help. And she having her too, kind of just like I would not drag me out of the house, but help me like get, like you said, just get out and like get some fresh air or go for lunch or just something that helped me through a lot of it as well. And you're not always fortunate enough to have someone like that, but I was really lucky to have like a girl there to support me and kind of help me through things.
yeah, absolutely.
And it gets hard when you're traveling and moving around from team to team. Like you can't really put down roots anywhere. And some of the best friends, like we've never been with them, that couple again since we played with them that year. And it's hard to even like maintain friendships when you're never in the same place. um but I think what we all have kind of gathered is like even though you might not talk to that person every day, you all are in the same boat. So when you do reach out and like or see each other again, you kind of pick up where you left off. And those relationships can really mean a lot, especially when you're going through tough times.
Well, I want to dive into surrogacy.
Yeah, let's do it.
Obviously it's funny because literally no one that's listening is gonna have any idea that I am connected to the surrogacy world as well, in a way. So I'm excited to talk about this because you
Yes,
can
me
kind of hear
too.
my perspective and coming from someone who was born from a surrogate, and I want to hear your perspective. Obviously decided to go with a surrogate, and
Yes.
I want to hear about like what that process was like for you. So you go through an agency, right? And then they
Yes.
kind of match you or give you a couple different options. I don't know if that's how it was with
Yeah,
you.
that's like exactly how it was.
So
um
what made you choose your surrogate?
the night I actually, I guess, decided to kind of sign up for, we were in Iowa and I was trying to find an agency. So I'd found a couple. So you have to kind of like fill out a submission form. So I wanted to kind of reach out to a couple different ones because I wasn't sure where I wanted to start. So my husband was away and I was having a couple glasses of wine and researching surrogacy agencies. And I kind of filled out forms for a couple, but if I'm being very honest, I think I was doing it, but I wasn't still on board yet that was the route I wanted to go. And I heard back from them and I never answered them. And so I think it was about 4 or 5 agencies I'd reached out to. And then one night, my husband and I were going out for dinner and I had a missed call on my phone and they left a message. And it was one of the companies that I had reached out to saying that they received my kind of submission form. And if I was really interested, they had a couple options, but one in particular that they thought would be a good match. And so I remember, obviously surrogacy is not cheap. And so that was kind of something that was rolling in my mind, was like, if we're going to do this, we're jumping in with both feet and we're not turning back. So that was a discussion we really needed to talk about. So we were at dinner and I was kind of telling my husband, oh, I just got this call and they left a message and, what do you think? And he was just like, well, what do you think? Like, I'm on board for whatever you're on board for. So what do you think? I'm like, well, I know that some women or couples wait years to be matched with surrogates, depending on their preferences and what they're looking for. And, if they think they might have an option for us already, like I want to have a family and we have all these embryos, like maybe we should just do it. Like, just let's not think about it. Let's just do it. And so he was like, all right. And so it kind of happened pretty quick from there. I'd responded to the agency and Heartland Surrogacy, who they were incredible. And I'll get into it, but our experience with them was amazing. And so obviously there's like an initial fee you pay in order for them to match you or send you potential matches. And so we did all that. And really quickly, they sent us an option. And the agency had said, okay, so this is Heather Selby and her family, and sent us their portfolio and kind of all about her, and said, we think you'd be a match, kind of review it and let us know if you'd like to proceed. And I have to be really honest, I'm kind of a person that I really trust my initial instincts on things. And I was at a bar class working out, and I opened up the portfolio and I was like, this is it. This is her. This is our surrogate. There's something about their family and her that really made me feel comfortable. I kind of felt like I knew them, which is so odd. But then I immediately text my husband before the class was starting. I said, check your email right now. The company sent us a surrogate. I think she's perfect. And so he was at the rink. He didn't get back right away. But I remember after the class, I wrote them back right away. We kind of talked, and I wrote the company back right away. And I said, absolutely, we'd love to proceed. Tell us what the next steps are. And from there, I think it was maybe like a day or two, maybe not even.
I feel like I'm there with you right now. I can just, as you're retelling the story, I can just hear the hope in your voice, as you open that email.
I'm getting excited talking about it. I think I haven't really ever divulged into the process of everything. I've kind of just done a short snippet of how we met our surrogate, but really getting into it is making me smile because I can feel all the emotions again. But yeah, so the company obviously reached out to Heather and said that we were interested and sent our profile to them as well. And I'm not sure what everyone's experience is, but the experience kind of I gathered from it was that there's a lot more intended parents who we are in the surrogacy process. My husband and I were considered the intended parents than surrogates. So it's kind of the surrogate's choice. Because they're risking their body to help carry another human for a family, so they kind of can sometimes be given multiple options for families and they get to choose. So I was trying not to get my hopes up, but we were really lucky. Within a day or two, like I said, the company got back to us and said that Heather and her husband Chad were interested and that we would like to schedule a Zoom call to all meet and kind of go over things and then decide if we really wanted to move forward past there. So it was so quick from there. It was literally right before Christmas or right after. I can't believe I don't remember the exact day, but that we did a Zoom call with them. And my husband I didn't say much on the call, and I don't really know why, because I always talk. I'm pretty outgoing. And my husband's more the shy one, but he was kind of the talker. And I remember the call being very emotional. He was the one that explained our story to them and why we were going down the road of surrogacy and, what we were looking for out of it. And they ask you so many questions that I feel like I didn't, because it was so quick, I didn't think much about what I wanted out of a surrogate or what kind of situation or experience I was looking for. And I think that was a really good thing because I went in so open-minded, and I was in my mind, I was just like, this woman is offering to carry a child for my family. I trust that she is going to do anything in her power to carry the baby and be like in the most healthiest way. And I just trusted her from the get-go. And I didn't want to give too many guidelines on what I was looking for, because this woman had already had children of her own that were healthy, and she was a mom and she was raising a family. Like, I'm going to trust that what she's doing is right. I'm not going to tell her what I think is right. Like, what do I know? I know nothing. So I remember my husband kind of explaining our story, and she started to cry and I was crying, and her husband was like looking at Cal, and I remember him saying like, wow, you guys have been through a lot. And then Heather started to speak, and she started to talk about why she got into surrogacy and how she had thought about it for a long time, and had knew someone that was struggling and had offered to help. And that person kind of felt like they weren't at that point in their process yet for surrogacy. But she, I think in her mind, had thought about it for so long that she still wanted to do it. It was still something that she wanted to do, was to help another couple. And she just said she has two young girls of her own, and every time she'd look at her kids, she couldn't picture her life without them. And so she just really had like an emotional tie to anyone struggling to have a family. She, without any of us saying like, okay, let's go for it, I think we all left that call just feeling really positive and really good about the initial meeting with Heather and her husband. And the agency that we were dealing with wrote an email and said, Heather and her husband, they would love to move forward if you were interested. And we were like, yeah, let's do it. So it was a fairly quick process initially, from meeting the agency, getting connected with Heather and her husband, and then moving forward from there. I feel like that process happened really fast. It was kind of after that where it took a lot longer than I expected to get to the point of like embryo transfer. But I think those moments and it was right around Christmas time. And I remember I was actually going overseas to go visit my brother with my family. And I just remember feeling so hopeful. Like in my mind, it was like I knew in a year or two, I was going to have a baby, like my baby that I'd been working so hard for and gone through so much for. And I think that just definitely put me in a different light and gave me so much hope moving forward. And of course, it's always nice to feel that when it's around the holidays and it's a happy time. So yeah, it was definitely I would say, I guess our low and our high were very close together in our journey. And that was certainly a high of everything that we'd gone through, for sure.
Okay, this is for sure going to be like a 2-hour interview. I'm just saying, because I feel like we could literally talk about this like all day long. Because I think
we haven't even gotten into yours yet. I feel like I'm the only one talking.
No, oh my gosh. Well, that's hello. You're the guest. You got to be talking. Okay. I mean, okay. This is like a pure example of everything happens for a reason. Yes. I always have said this about surrogacy, and like, obviously it doesn't like take away from everything you've gone through, but there had to have been a reason that you got connected to this person to have this specific child. Like, it's so interesting if you think about it like that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, if you never met this person, then maybe like your son wouldn't be the same bait. Like, I
think about that all the time. I really do. Just like you said, I think everything happens for a reason. And if I wouldn't have, first of all, I couldn't imagine having not met Heather and her family.
Right.
My husband and I say this all the time. It's like we knew them forever. I believe in everything happening for a reason. I believe in, like, sometimes people are put into your life to help transform it, or like at the right time, at the right moment when you need them. Like, I believe in all of that.
I don't know if you've ever heard of soul contracts, but it's like, people say that like every person that you meet, you have like a soul contract with. So like you're supposed to meet them for a reason. Like it's just like part of like the design of your life. And it's kind of cool to think about because
that's interesting.
I always think about it like with my situation, which obviously I will get into in a little bit, but like just my dad or my parents never would have met my surrogate if this didn't happen to my mom. Like, so it's just, it's kind of crazy. So I mean, I believe it. I think it's really interesting, but yeah, everything happens for a reason. And I think that's so cool. And obviously she's still a part of your life and you know, their family and stuff. So, and that's like such a beautiful part. And there are people that decide to go through surrogacy. And like, I totally respect and understand that part of not wanting to have communication with their surrogate or vice versa. Which I think is a personal decision.
I think like I said, when I went into it, I was super open-minded. I didn't really know what I wanted or what to expect. And I kind of just wanted like it to be natural and the relationship to just like grow into what it is, you know? And so it was like, if we're not meant to be good friends or if we're not meant to have a relationship after, then like, it is what it is. Like, that's how it's going to be.
Are you guys close?
We are. I wish that we talked more. I mean, like life gets in the way, you know, it's chaotic and but we still keep in contact when, especially milestones for my son, like he had his first birthday. Of course, we were all in quarantine and it was over Zoom. But we Zoomed them in so they could see and like sing happy birthday to him. And we try to kind of connect when we all have a chance. Like they have 2 children of their own and they're busy, and so do we. So and especially with COVID, it's made it so much harder because before my son was born, they flew into Lehigh Valley, which is where my husband plays right now, and came for the weekend and watched his game. And like, it was felt like we had friends flying in to see us. It was very natural and it was a super fun weekend. And then obviously when we had our son, we were all together then, but we haven't been able to see them in person since our son was born. So almost 2 years now.
Wow.
And we've had plans of them visiting us in Nashville or them coming into games, but it's just been so difficult with COVID to make anything work. But I definitely feel like she will be in our lives for forever. And it's kind of one of those friendships, like you don't need to talk every day, but we'll always be there for each other. And I mean, we share such a huge bond. She calls my son her little belly buddy. So I think for her, especially, she has that connection. Even she says like she has no genetic connection to Camden at all, but she has a connection to him. She carried him for 9 months. It's like, if, you know, every time I send her a little video, she feels just so special to be getting little snippets of his life and hearing how everything's going, because she feels like he's her little buddy. And I think that's really special. And I hope that, you know, one day down the road when we tell him, I hope that he can see it that way too, you know, that he's really lucky and he's special because he has another little friend that shared in on his story to being born. And like you said, like, I don't know, I just couldn't picture it having gone any other way, because if we wouldn't have had Heather and we wouldn't have done surrogacy and all that, I wouldn't have Camden. So to me, it was like, it was all meant to be that way.
Well, I think one of the benefits of just the year that we're living right now, it's like 2021 and surrogacy is more common. And like you said, there's celebrities, you know, big time, like Kim Kardashian and Kanye West, like it's more talked about, you hear it more. And I think that's going to be a benefit to your son for other people understanding. Like
I 100% agree with you. And this is something I think about all the time, that I think when the time comes for us to tell him, because I want him to be an age where he's going to understand, he might have kids in his class that were carried by a surrogate as well. It's going to be so much more common. Because it's already going down that route. There's a lot of people I've heard of recently. I think you hear about it more in like the celebrity world, because that's, you know, what you see on TV or what you see on social media. but, so many couples that are going the surrogacy route for their own reasons. Like everyone, has different backgrounds, whether, it be gay couples, lesbian couples, things like that. They all have a different reason for why they would have a surrogate. But I think that it's definitely going to be a benefit for him that when we do tell him, it'll be much more common.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I feel like I should tell you my story a little bit just so that because I feel like I have so much to say, but
I have questions for you because I just want to know so much about, how it was for you, because I feel like you're telling me from potentially Camden's perspective of what it was like.
Yeah, well, for me, it was a bit different because back when I was born, like it was not common at all.
Absolutely.
So my parents married when they were older. I like my dad jokes in my wedding speech. He's like, because of his commitment issues. But my parents met when they were like 35, I think. And so my mom was married before and she had 2 children of her own. And then she met my dad and he just had no children at all. My dad's a child psychologist. He loves kids. He's always wanted kids, but again, goes back to the commitment issues. So when he met my mom, like he fell in love with her kids and raised them pretty much as his own. Like they were a little older. I think my sister was like, gosh, I want to say like, I don't know if 13 sounds too old, but they were older. Yeah. So anyway, so my dad had always wanted a biological child. I think that's just like a normal thing to feel.
Yeah.
And my mom, so they started like trying for a baby and my mom kept getting pregnant, but she couldn't stay pregnant. So she kept having miscarriages. I want to say she had like 5 or something like that.
Okay.
And a little bit of backstory on my mom is she was actually adopted. So she had a closed adoption and she was adopted in Maryland and my parents are now 75. So they're older.
Okay.
And I think that being adopted and having a closed adoption was always something that was really hard for her. Like growing up, she always wondered about her parents and she had amazing adoptive parents. Like she loved her parents. She was very fortunate growing up. But part of her felt like lost a little bit just because it was completely closed. And I think it's natural for every child to wonder, like, is my family out there? And like, what are my parents like? So she spent so much time of her life as she got older, like on these, like ancestry and like piecing the puzzles together and trying to figure out who her family is and who her parents are. And craziest story is that she found out, she found her parents and
oh my gosh,
it's pretty insane. So, kind of the long story short version is now my parents, like I grew up in Encinitas, California, and she found 5 brothers and sisters 2 cities over from us in California.
Oh my gosh.
And she was adopted in Maryland.
That is so crazy.
And they look like her. It's so crazy. And so she grew up with an adoptive sister. So they weren't blood related. So the family adopted 2 children, my mom and her other adopted sister. And her adoptive sister died maybe like 7 years ago. So my mom just like, she's always just like craved that connection. And so when she found this family, like a piece of her was so full. And her parents, they're not living anymore, but the fact that she like found these siblings and she's super close with one of them in particular. And I know it just like makes her so happy to get together with her. And she loves learning about like what her mom was like. But it's kind of crazy because her mom, like, I think the reason that she gave my mom up is because back then it was so taboo to have a child out of wedlock. And her mom got pregnant before she was married with a different man. Okay. So, and she never told anyone.
Wow.
She never told her kids. She never told her husband. So none of them knew.
Oh my goodness. That's so crazy. It's giving me chills.
So she was able to piece this. She's like really smart with this kind of thing. And like, she was literally able to piece this entire thing together through like ancestry and like studying like all this stuff and with DNA and everything. And like, she found her sister on there. because her sister is just like open to that kind of thing. And there was one sibling that was not open to my mom and not open to receiving her. And, you know, my mom was kind of just like, look, like I have my own family. Like I'm not trying to jump into yours. I've always wondered who my parents were and who my blood siblings were, if I had any. So anyways, that's kind of like a side story as to like my parents were not against adopting, but I think that if they were to do adoption, that they would want it to be open just because of my mom's experience with that, which there's nothing wrong with closed adoptions. But I think like, I mean, if anyone is listening that's been adoptive and it's been closed, I like think it's safe to say that they would probably always wonder who their parents were.
Absolutely. And I think also too, like you said, everyone's experience is so different. And even when you think of surrogacy, I know some people that haven't had great experiences. So it's only natural that everyone's different experience will give them a different feeling and a different result of what they want from it. And I would feel very similar to your mom. I would be so interested to know, you know, a little bit about where I come from.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Doesn't mean you're ungrateful for what you have, of course. But it doesn't, it's not terrible to want to know where you came from either.
Yeah, exactly. It was just so insane that they were like 2 cities over.
Yeah, that's crazy.
In California. It's just like, what are the odds? My mom was feeling very defeated after like the miscarriages. Obviously, that was just like so disheartening because they would get so excited and like tell I think there was one time in particular, I remember them saying that they told like my dad's parents that they were pregnant and like everyone was so excited, and then she like miscarried, and it was just so hard on her emotionally. And I think like what you were saying about how you were feeling that you felt like a failure, I think that my mom felt that towards my dad because my dad had never had kids and he was so wanting, you know, a child. And I think like she felt like I can't give this to you.
That's literally, I think you're hitting the nail on the head because it's exactly how I felt about it. And I think too, my husband, he comes from a large family. His sister had 4 children. His brother at the time had a child as well. I think like he was around all that. And so he saw all these young kids, his nieces and nephews, and he wanted it himself. And that made me feel even more guilt because I couldn't give him what, you know, his sister was able to give her husband, or his sister-in-law was able to give his brother. It's just sometimes that constant reminder being around it, almost it puts more of a hurt on you because you just, you know, you're harder on yourself because you can't do what you really want to do for someone else. So I feel like I have that connection with your mom. I feel her pain in all of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it for like my mom too, just having 2 kids already, and like, you know, she was divorced, and I think she was okay not having more kids.
Right.
And
she wanted to do it for your dad.
She was doing it for my dad. And so the fact that like that kept happening, like she was just like, oh, you know, it was just emotionally draining and, you know, physically and everything. So they started looking into their options. And I don't remember exactly like how they really like learned about surrogacy because it really wasn't that common back then. So I was born in 92, but so they went through an agency and they actually met with another couple first. And the woman, she obviously, like we've talked about, we know that surrogacy is expensive. And I think that she was kind of just in it for the money. Like that was like the vibe.
And that was one of our biggest questions. Actually, I think my husband asked that to the agency, like how many, you know, what's usually in it for surrogates? Like, are a lot of them in it for the money because it's extremely expensive and they're getting a big lump sum of money, or like, why do a lot of surrogates do it? And the agency was very honest. They said about like, you know, a percentage of them absolutely are doing it because they need the money. But the majority of them are all doing it for a bigger reason. And a lot of them do it from their own like personal experience, you know, having someone in their family or friend group that has struggled and they just feel this urge to help. But you know, money can be such a big factor in it as well because they do get compensated, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. They're carrying someone else's child for 10 months. There's like,
Right. And rightfully so. They should be compensated. I don't think I'd ever be able to do it and not pay someone for doing
yeah.
something like that for me. Of
Unless it was
course.
maybe like your sister or something that was like,
Right.
I'm doing this, whatever. But yeah. Yeah. So they met with a woman and she was like, I think they met her in person. And she was basically like, I don't want any relationship with you guys. Like, I don't want a relationship with the baby. Like, I never want the baby to find me. Like, I want it to be completely closed. And like, instant red flags for my mom. She was like, absolutely not. Like, that's not, we're not doing that. I don't want her to feel like this sense of like what I felt, And so they were like,
well, and you don't know where 10 months is going to take you in a relationship either.
Exactly.
And like right away to be given all those red flags, like this is how it's going to be. It can feel so unnatural because, what happened? Like you're just being told it will never be anything more than this. And I think sometimes like going in with such an open mind, it's like, you're just going to see where this goes naturally. Because 10 months is a long time. And you also don't even know what type of experience you're going to have when the baby's born. Like I can get into this a little later, but the way Camden was born it was a big shock and it was a crazy experience. And I think that even brought us closer together too. So like, you don't know.
Great. And I mean, like, again, everything happens for a reason. My parents were like, no, that doesn't align with us or whatever. My parents are so open and so generous. And like, they were just like, oh, like that just doesn't feel right. So, then they got matched with Jody's profile and Jody's my surrogate mom. So, so they got matched with her and like instantly just loved her. She was just very open. And, at the end of the day, like my parents, they always went in with the mindset of we're always going to tell Devin about this, but like it's her decision whether she wants to pursue a relationship with her. Like that's not something that we're ever going to force on her. But if she wants a relationship with her, then like we always want that to be an option. And Jody was the same. She was like, I'm open to whatever you want. Yeah. She was like, if you guys want, her to know or the baby to know me, and I would love to have a relationship with them. But if not, I totally respect that and respect your privacy. So instantly they felt like good about that. And like, they just loved her off the bat. So yeah, so my mom, like she didn't have any, I don't know if they actually got to the point of like embryos or eggs, like her eggs just like weren't, like she just couldn't have, like her eggs weren't able to produce a child anymore. Right. And so I'm actually blood related to my dad and to the surrogate, which I'm actually curious if they still do that because I feel like that could cause a lot of problems.
I don't think they do. I was just talking about this actually on the weekend with my mom, and I can't say for certain, but I'm fairly sure I don't think they do because there's so many legal documents and so much like legality that has to go into having a surrogate that like I can't even remember everything we had to do, but we had to get a lawyer and you dive into everything essentially like if the paperwork isn't filed at birth because obviously like it was my egg and my husband's sperm, so genetically there's no connection to our surrogate Heather. It needs to be filed. Obviously, Heather birthed a baby, but I am the birth mom because I have the genetic connection.
Exactly.
Right. So it has to be filed a certain way in the court so that like on Camden's birth certificate, if we decided we never wanted to tell him, he would never know because I'm the birth mom and Cal is the birth father. But if it's done the other way around, the birth mother has to adopt the baby. So like, for example, if in today's world, if Heather was to have used her egg and it was Cal's sperm, I would have had to adopt the baby from Heather. And essentially that's up to the mother's discretion. So even if you have it in legal documents that it's going to go a certain way, she could change her mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that that would freak me out. I'm going to say like, if I was my parents in this position, I would be scared the entire time that she would like at the end be like, I want her, you know what I mean? Cause they technically can.
Exactly. And that is like, I've had people ask me this before, and I think it's just someone that doesn't quite understand that no, like it's my egg. I had surgery. Um, and I think the way Heather explains it to her kids is probably the easiest way to explain it to people, that Camden was in my belly and he had trouble growing and couldn't grow. So they had to take him out and put him in hers, and she carried him. And then I'm his real mom, and she gave him back to me.
That's cute.
But that's kind of how she explained it to her kids. It was really cute. But yeah, it definitely, like, the legal part scares you a little bit when you're going through it, because there's so many documents you have to fill out, and you have to get a will in case anything was to happen. And it definitely, there's so much more that goes into it than just meeting a surrogate and moving forward. I mean, at least in today's day, I'm not sure how it was in, like, when you were born, but
Yeah, no,
I'm
they had
sure
to
it
do
wasn't
that.
as, yeah, I'm sure it wasn't as in depth. Like, we had to even see a psychologist to get like an okay that we weren't crazy.
Yeah, no, they had to, like, I'm pretty sure they went to court and my mom had to sign as like my adoptive mom for that same
Right.
reasoning that you were saying. But yeah, I mean, they like fully trusted Jody and everything, but I do think there's such an emotional side of carrying a baby, that like going through the birth process and like carrying a child, like you have such a connection to that. And I think it's, talking to Jody now, she says like the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life is like say goodbye at the hospital, which is like,
Yeah.
it's like sad to hear, but also like she is such a blessing to our family. And
Mhm.
it's totally crazy to like think about what she did for my parents. I mean, it's like literally the most selfless thing you can do,
Absolutely.
to carry someone else's child for them.
It honestly is. And I think even for Heather not having that like genetic connection with Camden, she had a hard time at the hospital too. And I think that regardless of, you know, how, I guess in my experience, because I had done IVF and I had done it multiple times, conceiving naturally or conceiving by IVF didn't make much of a difference to me, because it was I still knew that it was my child. But Heather had to go through IVF with another embryo. She had never gone through it before. So the whole initial process was different. But she'd also carried two children of her own. So once the baby is growing, it's all the same. And even if in her mind she knew that getting there was much different, she didn't just have sex and get pregnant.
Right.
When you do have the baby, and then, Camden is going home with his parents, I know for her that emotional, um all the emotion she felt when we were leaving the hospital, I know was so hard on her, and I'm sure she would say today too, was probably one of the harder things that she had to do as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Plus your
think
hormones after birth and everything are just
totally.
like
And you
all
have to
over the
remember
place.
too all the things we do. Like, I'm still breastfeeding my daughter even though I'm pregnant. And that's something that most women, after you give birth, your milk comes in and you're breastfeeding, you're not even having that. So your hormones are changing, and then you're getting breast milk to provide for a baby that you don't even
Mm-hmm.
have. In Heather's situation, it was different. She actually couldn't provide breast milk, so that wasn't an issue. But still, like, she had a C-section, so her body's healing, and so many hormonal changes that you're going through. And I obviously didn't experience that, but I can only imagine how hard it was for her, that whole process.
Yeah. So when she got pregnant with, for the first time, Jody with my dad, she actually had a
Mhm.
miscarriage. And
Oh my
so
God.
it was really hard because like she got pregnant, told them, my parents were so excited, right? And then she had a miscarriage. And
Yeah.
they got that feeling of just like, what's wrong?
Deep.
Like,
Yeah.
and so the second time the second time it was me. And so Jody actually had 3 kids of her own. And so she has 2 daughters and a son.
Mhm.
And when she was pregnant with Patrick, which I call all of them like my brother and my sister, like we're all really close. My brother Patrick married us. We're all really close, and it's always been that way. And I think like my
Uh-huh.
parents, they always just told me from the get-go, like we grew up with them coming over to the house and like me playing with her kids. And so we've always grown up super close. But It is crazy. So she was pregnant with Patrick, who actually was a twin, but she didn't know. Like when she went in for her first appointment, they were like, oh, there's 2 sacks here, but there's 1 baby. And I remember actually this past summer, I was sitting down with my brother and his wife, and I was like, you know what? I'm like, it's so crazy because I just have this feeling that if she was going to have both of those, like if she was going to have twins, it would have been a girl. I was like, I don't know. I just don't think there would have been 2 of Patrick. And my sister-in-law was like, that's funny that you say that because I always told Patrick that that baby came back as you. And I was just like, oh my God. Like, like, I got like full body chills. Like, it was almost like, whoa, that's like true. Cause we're very similar and we look alike and stuff. It's crazy.
That's so crazy.
I always just think that like, obviously like my heart hurts for my mom that she had to go through that. Like I literally can't even imagine, you know, like what you've gone through, what my mom, like what so many women have gone through. But it's like, I am the product of my dad and Jody. And I think to myself, in some greater universe, like God was like, we need to get this man and this woman together somehow. How it went down in my situation, like, it just felt like that's like my mom like went through that so that I could be created. I don't know. I don't know if that sounds crazy.
No, it doesn't. It does all make sense. And
because how else would they ever have met? You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't be here. It's just so true. It's wild. So, and I know like you are, you know, anticipating like telling your son about this someday. And to me now at the point I'm at in my life, like, I just think it's more people to love growing up. And I think I will say, I think because I'm biologically related to Jody, like there was an aspect of that was hard for me growing up because I remember kids being like, you don't look anything like your mom. And saying stuff like, are you like, people would ask me like, are you adopted? Like you look nothing like your mom. And I remember that like really hurt because I just wanted like this cookie cutter family, you know, and like, I would change my story to people too. Like people would be like, oh, how many siblings would you have? And sometimes I would say 2, you know, like my mom's kids from her previous marriage, which I just say my sister and my brother, but like, yeah, I have 2 siblings. And then sometimes I would say I have 5. And people would be like, wow, your mom had a lot of kids. I'm like, yep, because I just didn't want to get into the details. And I think like growing up too, and why I said this is a benefit to your son, that like it's so much more common now. It's like back then, like in elementary school, like I remember telling people and they would be so confused. They would question me for like 20 minutes, like just kids, right? Like we're 8 years old, like they don't understand. And sometimes I would just like get into the story or whatever. They'd be like, wait, so your dad had sex with your mom and then, or no, your dad had sex with this lady and then I'm like, no. Like, and I would be so horrified. I'm like, just forget it, you know, like, so it's kind of funny because now that I think about it, like, I feel like I've almost held on to that narrative in my head because it's not a secret. Like I'll tell anyone that I get close to, like my story. It's not anything I'm ashamed of, but I think like that narrative is still in me a little bit. Like I'm not like public service announcement, like I have a surrogate mom because I love her. Like I love her family, but it's just like, I think from hearing over and over from people, like people being like, oh, that's weird or whatever, just like kids being kids and like not getting it. It is part of me that always felt like just different. But now I have a totally different outlook, and especially just being a mom now and like learning about what my mom went through and like learning about like the choice that Jody made for our family. And like, it's just, I have so much respect for everyone on both sides. And it's like made me who I am today. And I look a lot like Jody. I'll have to send you a picture after we get off the call.
Yes, I would love to see.
But yeah, like we've always stayed in touch and we're like, you know, we chat quite a bit. And my sister, her daughter just had a baby. So her son and Crosby are like 10 months apart. And then my sister-in-law, so my brother's wife, she's due on Christmas Day. So like, we're all going to have nieces and nephews, like close in age. Yeah. And it's so special because like they call me their sister and stuff. And like, I will say, I think like a hard aspect for me is like, I mean, like I am from a blended family, I guess. And so I think I always like longed for that like sibling, you know, like that like
Right.
full sibling. And so I would say that was probably the hardest part for me growing up, is like I never had that. Because I did almost grow up like an only child, since my parents are older and my mom's first two children are so much older.
Yeah.
I was really like the only one growing up in the house. And so I always like longed for that, you know, sibling.
That sibling connection. Yeah.
Exactly. But now it just feels normal. Like, do I wish I had that? Yeah. But it's part of my story, and like it makes me who I am. So I wouldn't change it now.
No, it's something like I had said to you before, it's something I think about so often. And I think I feel very similar to your parents, that I want Camden to decide what type of relationship he wants with Heather. And, if he doesn't feel he wants any relationship, that's his choice. Um, I have a relationship with her, and I always will, and that's my choice.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, when you're young and you're a kid, there's so many things, and those are the things I think about, that because I have Kala and because they're only 4.5 months apart, they are going to be in the same grade in school, and people are going to think they're twins, but they're not twins. And so how is that going to go about? And it just hurts me to my core that there might be some kid that might say, so you were adopted and you weren't, and this, not that this has anything to do with it, but my son has red hair, and I had red hair as a baby, and my grandfather had red hair, and my aunt has red hair. So it's from my side. But I have had people ask me, did your surrogate have red hair?
And
it's
painful.
It shouldn't bother me so much, but it does. And I feel the need right away to get so defensive, like, well, no, but also that doesn't matter because she has no genetic connection to him. I shouldn't have to say that, and I shouldn't feel like I need to, but I think that's my own insecurities, that like, no, he's mine, he gets it from me. But it's usually kind of an older generation that will say those things, or someone that just doesn't quite know surrogacy or much about infertility or everything science can provide nowadays, and that I'm so thankful for. But yeah, I do always think about that. I hope he doesn't get made fun of, or I know one day, just like you said, when he's your age and older, he's going to be so appreciative of his journey and how Heather brought him here. And I would hope he would be proud of me as a mom, and how I continue to, fight through struggle to have him. But it's going to take a while to get there.
I mean, I totally understand. Like, I would feel the exact same way because of everything that you've done to get him here. And I think, like, I remember, like, even people say this to me today, which is so just weird, but like, because my parents are older, people will say, oh, you must have been an accident. And yes. I always say, actually, the exact opposite. I was so wanted. I was so wanted. You have no idea. Like,
people say that about Kala too. Like, she was an oopsie. Okay, she was a surprise. Absolutely. She was not an oopsie. Let me tell you, every single month that I could potentially try to get pregnant and had an option, like, especially when we figured out what was going on, had a plan to potentially carry a pregnancy, I was doing it. Like, no, she was not an accident at all. Yes, was it hard having kids 4.5 months apart? Absolutely. It's not normal. I don't have anyone to confide in, to ask what they did when their son was 4.5 months and they had a newborn. But
that's a whole other episode.
Totally. Exactly. But we were also trying for 4 years to have a family. So,
you will take it.
Yeah, if our modern day Irish twins are different and not what people are used to, then that's okay with me. But it's perfect for us. So
yeah. And I love your story. I think that's amazing. And obviously I'm sure that was very like overwhelming and stressful to have 2 kids 4 months apart, but like you
Ask
wouldn't
me how I feel in
it.
2 months when we have 3 kids under 2.
Yeah. Oh my God. What? I didn't, oh my, yes. That's insane.
So, I'm actually, my son's birth, he'll be 2 on January 29th, and I'm due January 20th. So they're just under 2, but still.
Oh my Lord. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think like I think it's all about how you explain it. Like, it's like, looking back, I can't even remember when my parents told me. They were just always there.
Yeah.
But yeah, like now that you say that, your kids will be in the same class and they're only 4 months apart, I definitely see why that would come up, because I was thinking, oh, well, he's going to look like his parents. And so like, he might not have those issues, but like, yeah, like people might question, wait, what? Huh? So who, like,
Yeah.
and it's like, for a kid, I mean, like, now I can process and understand those feelings that I had, but it was like very triggering for me. Like, I was like, I just want to be normal. Like, I don't want people to question me.
Yeah.
But I think like
And
just,
that's all that you want as a kid, right? Like you don't want to be different. You want to be normal. You want to fit in. You don't want to have a different story than everyone else.
yeah,
And then almost as you get older, you kind of feel very appreciative for like the uniqueness of your background and your story.
totally,
But when you're
totally.
young, you just don't quite understand that.
Yeah. Just telling him like, you were so wanted and you
Yes.
like, we wanted you so bad, you have no idea. And if like anybody ever asks you those questions, like tell them like it makes you unique, or you have more people that love you and so many people that were fighting for you. And I think like that's something that like I had to keep reminding myself of when I was like going through it, like even though it just like felt like it was just an insecurity.
Yeah.
And people don't understand, and people still don't understand. Like I tell people, I mean, for them, like I can explain to people and they get it quicker. Obviously it's like, we're adults, like we understand,
Yeah.
we can process these things like more quickly than like before, where I have to tell the story for like 30 minutes
Exactly.
with people asking questions. But like, it's, people don't get it. And then like it's just like, okay, let's just, I'm just gonna, like you said, like it's just easier to just say they're twins, because I just don't want to get into it. And I
Yeah.
think it's a thing for me. I'm like, does this person feel safe for me to tell this story to? Like, are they gonna get it? Are they gonna understand? And like, LOL
That's
that I'm saying this,
exactly.
broadcasting this on a podcast, but it's my podcast, so it's all right. I'll I'll share with everyone. But yeah, I think it's beautiful, and I think it's amazing, the sacrifice that surrogates make for families. And it's also really makes you strong to do that, because it's not easy and I mean, as thankful and blessed as you are, I definitely think like maybe that feeling was still a little bit there for my mom, of like watching another person, carry their child. And like, I don't know if you feel that way at all. Obviously she was so
Yes.
grateful, but like, it's still like, I wish that could have been me kind of feeling.
100%. And I think I mean, I found out I was pregnant with Kala almost exactly halfway through our surrogate's pregnancy. And so I feel like the second half was a little bit different, because I did know that I was carrying a baby myself. But I always longed, like I wish that I carried Camden, and I wish that, you know, I would have been able to do that, and that I didn't have to ask for help, or that I didn't have to have someone else do it for me. But I will forever be so grateful to Heather and everything she sacrificed, and her selflessness, and her family, and how welcoming they were to me and my family. Um, and they she was brought into my life because of our situation, and I'll never ever regret that. But I
Totally.
definitely would be lying if I said I didn't always, wish it was me that carried him,
And
for
I think
sure.
that's completely normal. And like, even if she listens to this episode, she would understand
Yeah.
that. Like that's
100%.
a natural feeling to feel. And so with your third, that, congratulations, by the way, very exciting.
Thank you.
Um okay, so we don't know if it's a boy or a girl. I'm gonna have to try to like think
No.
about what I feel like it's going to be. Because I feel like I'm good at guessing, and I'll let you know.
Okay.
But did you conceive naturally, or did you do an IVF round, or what happened there?
We so I my daughter was about 10, just a little bit over 10 months when I found out I was pregnant. It was very natural. I never got a cycle back, and I was still exclusively breastfeeding my daughter. So I actually didn't think I could get pregnant. And I know, of course, I was that one that was like, oh, I haven't gotten a period back yet, and I'm still breastfeeding. So I don't need to go on birth control.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we knew we wanted more kids, and I knew I wanted another one like somewhat close to their age. But it was definitely a major surprise to us when I found out. It was kind of, we were on our way home from the Bahamas, and I was breastfeeding my daughter, and I said to my husband, like, oh, like my breasts are really tender, like they're kind of hurting. And I didn't really think anything of it, but then I started kind of doing the math, and I had like one cycle really brief at like 2 months before, but nothing was regulated, and my body definitely wasn't like back to normal. But I was like, maybe I'm pregnant. And he was like, no, there's no way. Like, yeah, there's no way. And then the next day we got home and we were packing up to move back to Canada. And I was like, you know what? I should just buy a pregnancy test and just see, because I feel a little off. And it went pregnant right away.
Oh my gosh.
And I thought,
how did you feel? Were you like, holy effing hell? Or were you like, I mean, obviously, I'm sure it was just a shock because you have 2 young kids.
Honestly, I was in shock for sure, but I was also so excited because
what a blessing.
It's such a blessing. And like, even with Kala, I was actually due to go on medication to induce lactation because I wanted to breastfeed Camden. And so I was waiting to get a period in order to start all that medication, which basically tricks your body into thinking you're pregnant so that you can produce breast milk. And
side note, did you breastfeed both of them?
So Camden wouldn't latch.
Okay.
I tried. And he, you probably won't want to use this, but we went to a lactation consultant to get him to attempt to latch. And he there was milk spraying all over the lactation room. We tried to put a nipple shield on. He bit it and spit it across the room.
Oh my Lord.
The lactation consultant was just laughing at me. Like, I don't think he's going to latch. So I did give him breast milk in a bottle for a long time. I pumped and gave him bottled breast milk, but he had been bottle fed for 4 months at that point. So he really wasn't interested in learning to breastfeed. But he did like my breast milk. So I was lucky enough that I could feed him that way.
Yeah. I was just curious because I always think about like, oh my God, twin moms, or just like in your situation. Yes. I'm like, how the hell, like feeding
with him, I wouldn't have been able to do it in the beginning because I was like, I'll always be a high risk pregnancy. I should probably get into what they diagnosed me with at some point too. I will always be a high risk pregnancy. So they wouldn't have allowed me to attempt to breastfeed him because I was only like 22 weeks along when he was born. And sometimes that can induce early term labor. So it wasn't even an option until I gave birth. And then he was just too old by the time I gave birth to want to latch. But like I said, he loved it in a bottle. So I was lucky enough that I had enough milk to be able to like pump and feed him bottled breast milk.
Yeah.
For a while, I think I did it at least until he was over a year. And then I noticed my supply kind of dipped a bit. And obviously primary baby that needed my nutrients was Kala, my daughter, because he was having formula and was perfectly fine. So I kind of stopped after a year. And then with Kala, I haven't stopped yet, although she's really not that interested anymore because it tastes different. So I would say it's been almost a month now where like before she used to ask, and then now she doesn't really ask sometimes, but she's not really that interested. Yeah.
I feel like we have so much to like talk about with each other. I'm like, this could be a 4
I know. I just looked at the clock and I was like, 3:30. Oh my gosh.
I know. My husband texted me. He's like, hello. I was like,
are you alive?
Yeah. So what were you diagnosed with? And this was like diagnosed with as to why the miscarriages kept happening, right?
Yes. So when our surrogate was about 3 months along, maybe 4 months along with Camden, I had another miscarriage. And this one was, I would say around 8 weeks probably. And And Candace, the nurse I was mentioning earlier, she ran a whole bunch of tests, and I ended up finding out that when I miscarried and she called me, that she actually was misdiagnosed. She also had multiple miscarriages, or recurrent miscarriages, as I call them. And she was misdiagnosed and had to get a hysterectomy. And she also, so she had 2 kids with a previous husband and then remarried, and her husband wanted more kids. And they had to, well, they got a surrogate to carry their biological twins. And so she said to me, like, I will not allow you to give up without having a proper diagnosis. Like, we will get to the bottom of this. We will find out why this is happening. And
I love her. That's so awesome that she was advocating so much for you.
She honestly is, I think infertility you can have lots of different experiences. And I think sometimes it can be, sounds so terrible, but a little bit of like a money grab in a sense. Like, you go there and it can be like that. And sometimes you feel like you don't have anyone in your corner.
For sure. I mean, like it is expensive to do these tests and to try, IVF, everything. It's like, I mean, I've seen like GoFundMe's for this because they're like, we're trying so hard to have a baby, but we can't afford it. And like, and it's
exactly.
Yeah.
And like, there's kind of I find when you start IVF, there's like a one shoe size fits all that they throw on women, but everyone is so different and every body is so different. And so with Candace, she ended up running a huge panel of tests on me. And she was like, I think we need to treat you for antiphospholipid syndrome, which is basically a disorder where you have blood clotting, and it's only pregnancy related. And so you will end up miscarrying because you will essentially have so many blood clots towards the placenta that when the placenta is supposed to take over to help grow and nurture the baby, it basically it won't be allowed to do that. And so the baby will unfortunately pass because it's not getting proper blood flow or proper oxygen to be able to continue growing and breathing. And you can have multiple recurrent miscarriages from this. And so she felt like they needed to treat me for antiphospholipid syndrome, and as well as let me pull this, a reproductive autoimmune disorder, which is basically where when you get pregnant, your body sees it as something foreign and attacks it. Wow. And so that was kind of the reasoning why I was having all these miscarriages between like 8 and 12 weeks, and all these embryos that had nothing genetically wrong to them, and I was having no issue getting pregnant. I mean, mind you, I did have endometriosis, so it wasn't always easy to get pregnant. We did struggle with infertility when I had that at the time. But it was obviously I was having an issue staying pregnant. So she said, if you get pregnant again, we are going to treat you with, basically it was a protocol where I would take a needle in my stomach every day. It's called Lovenox, and it thins your blood, and then a couple different pills that would counteract my immune system to get it from attacking the baby. And so that next month was the last month that I had before I would start inducing lactation for Camden. And my husband and I were the doctors had said to me, just be careful because obviously if you get pregnant, you can't start the medication. And so my husband and I kind of talked about it, and I was like, I'm not being careful. We've spent 4 years. Like, if I get pregnant, then Candace says she's going to start this protocol and we'll give it a try. Like, let's just not worry about it. And whatever happens, happens. And luckily we got pregnant with Kala, and they got me on all the medication right away. All the needles and blood thinners I needed to be on, and the pills I needed to take. And I'm so thankful to say that she was healthy and I was able to carry her. I had to be induced at 39 weeks because of my blood thinners and the complications that can come of it. Wow. But she was a healthy baby, and everything worked out great. So thank you, Candace, because she's basically the reason, that I have another little one on the way, and that I have Kala.
Oh my goodness. See, I truly believe that people like that are like angels. Like they
She
are
is.
angels.
And even with this pregnancy as well. So you can imagine, obviously, the sense of kind of like anxiety and fear that I get anytime I see a positive pregnancy test. And so she was able to get me on all of my medication. So this time around's been a little bit different. My levels haven't quite, with Kala, I was really fortunate. My blood levels stayed pretty stagnant and similar throughout the whole pregnancy, but this time they fluctuated. So I actually take 2 needles a day. I give myself one in the morning and one in the evening. But I haven't had to take any of the autoimmune, the reproductive autoimmune protocol, because they think my body kind of regulated itself after Kala. So when I got pregnant this time, it didn't see it as anything foreign. So it allowed it to kind of grow in a better environment.
Oh my goodness. Well, I am so happy for you. And when are you due?
I'm due January 20th. So that's my full term with the just like disease I have.
Okay. And you might need to be induced earlier than that.
No, so that would be when they would induce me.
Okay.
But I'm hoping that I might not need to be this time around. I'm with a different clinic here because I was in Nashville when I had Kala, and I'm in Pennsylvania now. So the high risk clinic that I see here works a little bit differently. So they've kind of told me that I see a doctor every 2 weeks, and I get my blood work taken very, very, very frequently. So I'll just be monitored really closely towards the end, probably multiple times a week. And then we'll kind of go from there, especially seeing as it would be like my second full term pregnancy. Hopefully. I might go into labor earlier. I just don't really know. But at this moment, we haven't scheduled or really decided fully on induction. We'll have to kind of like wait. They're allowing me to wait and see. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I feel like we'll have to talk again at some point and just catch up, because I feel like we're like bonded now after just talking and swapping stories and just like having reverse situations and surrogacy. And I'm so excited for your new addition, and just thank you for being so vulnerable and open. And like, I honestly just think it's so amazing. You know, I've had a couple girls on the podcast that have shared about like miscarriages or fertility journeys, and I'm just really honored that you chose to share that with me and with the podcast audience, because it really helps so many people to not feel alone. So I'm super grateful for you. Obviously, we follow each other on Instagram, so I'll be stalking your life.
Well,
and you're 3 under 2.
Thank you so much for having me. It actually was very like therapeutic for me to open up and talk about my story again. And if I can help anyone going through something similar, that's what I want to do. So I have big aspirations on hopefully being able to turn my story into a positive and help couples that may go through something similar one day. So hopefully being able to open up about my journey and continue to do it will get me there. So we'll see.